like the little hey, and there it is. What's up, wrestling fans? I'm Doug, and I share a bank account with my mom.
You're not supposed to admit those kind of things, Doug, because it's Wednesday night, and you know what that means.
Indeed, I do. It's a very special Two Bros Wrestling show. What are we doing on a Wednesday, Kevin?
I'm not actually sure what it means for us to be on a Wednesday night, other than it's a special edition of the Two Bros Wrestling Show. We weren't with you on Sunday this past week, and we wanted to wait until we had a new AEW World Champion crown to devote, Doug, our entire topic tonight. If you're a regular viewer of the show, folks, we don't have an opening bell. We aren't going to have a big finish. We're going to save those for our regular broadcast this upcoming Sunday. Tonight, Doug, we're going to focus on something that when we last were with the folks, we really didn't have a complete picture. It had just happened. And we know a little more now about some of the fallout of the huge backstage brawl that CM Punk sort of set off by his media scrum.
I'm not sure that, we know more, but do we really? More came out, but everything is still very obtuse with this. And I imagine that is because there's actual legit, shoot legal action going on here. This isn't a work at all.
Maybe it's a good time to level set before we really get into things. Let's just set the scenario of what we do know and what we still don't yet know. What we do know for certain, CM Punk, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and Ace Steel are all still suspended following the melee. The length of their suspensions, though, still not known. None of them have been acknowledged or referenced on AEW programming since the incident. But we also know that the others who were suspended as a part of this, and that includes Christopher Daniels, Pat Buck, Michael Nakazawa, Brandon Cutler, they also received suspensions. This is one way we know the independent investigation is still ongoing, because all of those individuals have been cleared and have returned to work. And reports are that they were all just trying to break up the brawl, and so they have been reinstated. We do know that the Young Bucks, after silence, after also suspending production of Being the Elite, they have since now in the last day or so began to cryptically anyways allude to their suspensions now on Twitter. What we don't know, Doug, though, is still pretty much everything else. To your point, we don't know when any of these suspensions will be lifted. We don't know if CM Punk will be fired. We don't know if the Elite are still going to be VPs or even with the company. So there's still quite a bit about the situation we don't yet know.
But we do now have not an interim this time, but we do have a new AEW World Champion.
Yeah, so before we get into why Tony found himself in the situation he's found himself and what he can do to get out of it, we at least know what the break glass plan for Tony to get out of the situation is. And that should have been apparent to any of us who saw the man give the promo last Wednesday after canceling his fishing trip. In this case, the get out of jail free card for Tony, at least what he hopes is that we're going to make Jon Moxley the face of this company. What do you think of that decision? Is that the right choice to move beyond this Elite CM Punk kerfuckle?
It's a good word, kerfunkle.
Thank you.
So, here's my thoughts, and maybe I've been, programmed so heavily by WWE for so many years, but, I was going back and forth with a friend while we were watching this earlier, and I said, okay, here's what happens. Brian wins, MJF, and then he was like, okay, and then the MJF group, I'm like, that's exactly the way I would book this. MJF goes ahead and cashes in tonight, because they sprinkle a little bit of that throughout anyway by having Morrissey, not the singer from the 80s, but the former Big Cass, make an appearance earlier on, and they keep concentrating on MJF. So I'm like, okay, this is classic booking here. You have these two friends and from the same stable beat down each other. I was thinking Mox has had his time. He gets beat down, gets to go on that vacation. Brian goes over, and then the firm comes down, takes out Brian, and then MJF rolls in, cashes in his like Money in the Bank giant poker chip, whatever it is, and is your champion in New York. It goes over great. That did not happen, and I'm kind of glad that it didn't because it's almost armchair WWE booking. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
And
we went with the straight match, and probably the person that a lot of folks would have guessed that Tony would have gone to. And I hate to say the safe choice because there's very little about John Moxley that ever appears safe. But in the current environment that Tony finds himself in, and that is an environment where he's going to be spending these next few months trying to secure a lucrative television contract for a brand that has been severely damaged publicly at a time when money is not exactly easy flowing from the new
right,
business daddies that Tony will have
business
to answer
daddies.
to. So,
Scissor me, business daddy, right?
I mean, the man needs some stability going into these negotiations, and
Nothing says stability like Mox.
like a hardcore loose cannon of a wrestler who, to his credit, he proved himself a company man loyal to Tony Khan, and when asked, he stepped up and said the right things and did the right things. And I think this is his reward: is that you had a great summer to carry us through a legit injury, and then you canceled your own plans to save us when we were in true crisis mode.
Save us, Mox.
Save us,
Really?
Mox.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that, I mean, to your point of there could have been some surprises and some cash ins of the poker chip and all, but I don't know that in this instance that the safe choice wasn't the right choice, just because if Tony needs anything right now, it's stability. And so don't worry about the swerves. Don't worry about the WWE
Right.
booking. Let's just go ahead and put it on the guy who probably should have been the world champion all summer anyway, instead of that interim champion, and let's move on from there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, Mox. We talked about that promo he cut. After the fallout from All Out or the brawl out from whatever we're calling it. I don't even know. But the promo he cut where he did what you need to do. You put over your company. You put over all your talent. You put over your opponents, and you move on. And that's what he did. And I really think tonight, overall, I think this was a pay-per-view quality TV show tonight.
For sure.
And, I think tonight is established that no one individual, regardless of how big of a draw they are or what they've done in the past, but no one individual is bigger than a company because everybody showed up and did what they needed to do tonight.
And
on free TV.
And it was the largest gate in AEW's history for free television show. The money they drew tonight in that house was the most they had ever drawn for something they were giving away for free.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of fan service in the booking. We saw several title changes, all for very, very internet wrestling community popular performers. We saw a huge surprise return in Saraya.
I popped. I don't know about. I almost texted you, but I straight up because I was a few minutes behind on the feed.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, if he's either already seen this or he hasn't seen it yet, so I was like, I'll save it.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that to spoil because I was legitimately surprised. Yes, the former WWE talent known as Paige in WWE had basically said that she wouldn't mind another match. Maybe for something big she'd come back. She'd like to think that she could, but the announcers tonight were really putting over the fact that the whole landscape of the division has changed. It didn't appear, at least the way they've set her up, is that she's coming in for a pay-per-view match and then gone.
That didn't come across as a one and done. That came across as this girl's medically cleared and she's ready to go, just like Daniel Bryan and Edge before her.
And that's exciting. I mean, she is legit in every sense of the word. A very healthy Saraya who can even, partially recapture what she was before she went down with the injury would be a very, very wise signing by Tony Khan. So there was a lot done tonight to try to say nothing to see here. Let's look over here instead.
Right.
But Doug, that sort of gets us into the meat of what we're talking about, and that's how Tony himself became the, as I termed it, the elitely punked billionaire. Does in the past, has it always been about, hey, let's put on that next great match is enough to erase whatever is going on behind the scenes or whatever the dirt sheets are saying? Is a good show and the right champion and a surprise return, is all that actually enough to erase what has happened before? Is it enough to distract attention from all that is still going on behind the scenes in AEW?
So here's what I think about, the, let's just say the folks involved, because we don't know, and we're probably never going to know until it comes out in court, if it goes that far, what exactly happened, who threw chairs, who bit who saved dogs, and all that nonsense. We're not, you know.
I'm so, it would seem so ridiculous, the words that coming out of your mouth right now, if they weren't true.
But those people are where the tension is going to lie going forward. When those people do come back to work, assuming they come back to work, that's going to be the big problem. I think tonight showed that the show definitely can go on. The talent is there, the creative is there, and good things can happen. I mean, it almost goes back to that old WWE thing when Vince McMahon was backed into a corner. That's when he came out swinging, and the product was really, really good. I've said to you before, AEW reminds me of WCW when it was really good, and I was thinking that tonight. This is like a really good, again, pay-per-view quality TV show that we got tonight.
I'm in agreement with the notion that this is not enough to take AEW down. They definitely have a stacked enough roster and enough creative talent behind the scenes, enough creative individuals to work inside that ring. That part, I don't think that, even though it's more salacious, more fun to talk about, more fun to speculate on, like, what's really happening. I really think that CM Punk and the Elite and all of that is much less a threat to AEW and Tony Khan right now than the Warner's Discovery merger. I think that even though that's less sexy to talk about, that's way more of a legitimate, this will disrupt the company more than four individuals as high profile as they are, four individuals being suspended. And even if four individuals never came back, I still think that AEW's would be fine. It's definitely that financial and merger situation that is more of a threat for them, though the idea that you don't have control of your own house could bleed into those negotiations that Tony hopes to have turn out in his favor.
Yeah, because Tony just sitting there. And anybody who's watching and is going to make any decisions about AEW's financial future as far as TV deals has seen that media scrum, or somebody is showing it to him, going, "Really, you want to give more money to this guy who sat there and let his talent, his hired help, talk like this about his EVPs?" And just sit there and just nod in that, oh, it's almost like Tony's
nervously drink water.
Right. It's almost like, you go back and watch it, and I'm thinking he's sitting there nodding, but yeah, it's not necessarily that he's agreeing with what Punk is saying. He's just like, yep, I'm going to have to fix that. Oh, yeah, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem.
If you didn't read it as a nervous tick or knew anything about Tony's awkward personality, you watch it, and if you didn't know what was going on, it does look like he's sitting there agreeing instead of like just nervously like not knowing what to do. I think that the eye closings and things probably told more about his true feelings than the nervous bobbing of his head that he probably regrets.
Right. Because I mean, you go back and you watch it, and you're thinking, this guy runs this company. This is a live thing that's going on, not just in front of people in a room, but it's a broadcast that's happening, and people are seeing this. He's got this this wild card with a live mic, and any intervention he tries, he quickly gets shut down, not in a super aggressive manner, but gets shot down, and to the point where I'm like, I'm sure he really wants to light him up right now, but
But he can't.
he can't.
Yeah.
He's just got to let it roll.
Yeah.
He's just got to let it roll. You know?
Yeah, he definitely found himself stuck during that media scrum. But to my mind, he wasn't stuck in the many months leading up to that. You put yourself, Tony Khan, in this situation. And really, Doug, we only know many of the things that leak out or have been reported or what those that are in AEW or were in AEW says. But now that we know the things that we do know, I was thinking about this. The canary in the coal mine here was Cody Rhodes' departure.
Yeah.
That was really
now.
Yeah, that was really the first indication that we had that it wasn't kumbaya, and that maybe they're like, when one of the founders can just up and leave, that's when I first realized that, oh yeah, you look at everything since Malachi Black, MJF, Thunder Rosa, CM Punk, obviously, the Elite, obviously, but right. There's not just any one wrestler you could point to as having a problem with the company or having a problem with Tony Khan. That was unheard of in the first 2 years. This was a thing that, you think Mustafa and his, free Mustafa campaign with Vince, or Sasha and Naomi walking out. You think of these disgruntled employees as WWE workers upset with Vince McMahon, and yet it's not just this one situation. Really, right. You can go back to Cody and whatever happened there, which they kept really professional to not let really get out from behind the scenes. But yeah, Thunder Rosa, MJF, as I said, Malachi, these are all
Grisham.
Yeah.
Let's not forget about that.
Yeah. Let's not. Yeah. And that one was ugly. That was apparently yelling and screaming at each other. And Big Swole, let's not forget.
Oh, yeah.
Her accusations that were particularly heinous for a company that wants to be perceived as forward thinking and progressive when it comes to the diversity that they showcase on screen. So I guess maybe the best way to say this at this point is welcome to the wrestling business, Tony Khan.
Yes.
I mean, I know it feels like, Tony's been in wrestling for a while now. AEW has been wildly successful for a while now, but truly I saw this as this is your welcome to the wrestling business, Tony moment. Mm-hmm. Everything up to this point has been the honeymoon of you're all putting on great shows, great matches, and you're not WWE. We love you. We love everything about it. But that goodwill,
here's the thing. Yeah, because that goodwill, the honeymoon period is clearly over, because, now in mid going into late 2022, we have wrestlers wanting to leave AEW to go to WWE.
And 1 year ago, we would be telling that news story with those 3 letters of AEW and those 3 letters of WWE,
right,
flopped in that sentence.
I mean,
and that is, I don't know if Tony up to this point just got a bit of a free ride as well, just by being the alternative, or if his own doing helped change things backstage, and that could be you could look back at the Cody situation falling apart, and trust me, I understand. In any business, we all work in some environment, be it a professional environment, whatever your role in your company or organization is, insubordination and backbiting are not unique to the wrestling business.
Absolutely.
It's just unique that insubordination happens live in front of the camera, and the backbiting might actually be a man biting you in the back. So, it's a little different than the kind of business that Tony has been used to before.
We don't know that was in the back. I mean, there's some.
It's true.
What, like the Japanese game show where it looks like Kenny got bit on the arm, not the back.
It's been a forearm bite. Oh my gosh, Doug, do you think that in some ways, though, that we all wanted to love AEW so much that we did give them a pass for a while? And I think that one of the reasons we loved it all so much, I'll speak for myself. I know you were Dynamite, Doug, so you can even probably speak more eloquently about this than I can. But wasn't part of the notion of why AEW was so great, is that it was a bunch of friends that came together to create a wrestling company in the way that they wanted to create a wrestling company, different from the top-down management style that WWE had. And that's what we loved about it. Hey, it's a bunch of friends making the kind of wrestling show they wanted to see.
And then when, one of the heartbreaking things for me from the inception of AEW was that Marty Scurll did not go to AEW. He stayed. He chose to go to ROH. Worked out really well for AEW, considering everything that happened with Marty. I mean, I have a villain T-shirt I cannot wear now to this day, but it worked out really well for them because it was like, are these guys? That was my first question. Are these guys really as tight as they are on being the elite? And at this point, I have to say I'm sure that the Bucks and Kenny are tight. Hangman is kind of the guy on the periphery. Cody was way out there, I think, and you
Well,
know,
and success and time changes things.
absolutely
I mean, I don't doubt around the the All In, the original All In pre AEW, that it was all for one and one for all. Let's show Dave Meltzer and the wrestling world that we can do what they think we can't do. But
mm-hmm.
the idea that it was a bunch of friends sitting around running a wrestling company might have been true at the beginning and for the first year or so, but it's definitely wasn't the case in the last 8-9 months. Part of why Cody was dissatisfied. Maybe they weren't getting along together backstage, but they certainly, despite their titles, don't seem to have the same creative responsibilities, control, or anything that they had at the beginning. It definitely went from a bunch of friends together backed by a money man to the money man was running the show. Everyone else still had their titles. And that's why the idea of AEW as the company that's different, ran by wrestlers for wrestlers, is not really true anymore, if it ever was.
Right. And it should really be the money man running the show, but then you hear this stuff and you're like, okay, Tony's taking control. He's doing all the booking. He's yelling at people in headsets, but then he gets elitely punked, as you so eloquently put it, in a media scrum, and it and then from that he's got his EVPs, his executives, fighting the talent.
And you could go back to the beginning and say
Allegedly.
that when they were all maybe tighter, would bringing in someone like a CM Punk been something that that Kenny and Cody and the Bucks would have done? That was Tony Khan's big get, because that was the big that was the holy grail that Vince McMahon could not get, that Tony and his money could get. And maybe even that was the canary in the gold mine, that with all the attention and the pluses you get with CM Punk, it comes with some baggage as well.
Yeah, Punk is a great wrestler. He's a great talent, but that media scrum, and I'm like, what are we doing? What is anybody doing with all that came from that media scrum and the nonsense that came afterwards? I was watching that tonight. Watching Dynamite tonight, thinking there were professionals. These guys in the ring right now throughout the night, and gals throughout the entire night, solid professionals. They may have their issues or whatever, but they show up, they do the work. You know, these are the professionals. I, I'm disappointed in my AEW right now, or some of the major talents in my AEW. But what happened tonight, I cannot say enough good things about. I hope it is a turning point that does send a message to the money men above Tony that it is worth continuing to invest in because it can turn a profit.
So when you say we're disappointed, it's obvious that it was obvious to the world that CM Punk went out, shot his mouth, made himself look bad, made his boss look bad, made the company look bad. But I'm maybe a bit of devil's advocate here. Maybe I'm taking an unpopular opinion, but let's talk about where the uncomfortable thing is that as easy as it is to blame Punk, let's talk about the Elite, their role in this, and the fact that CM Punk, as much as we might disagree with the way that he chose to express it, might not exactly be wrong. And I will point to this past weekend, Malachi Black going on his social media to discuss his situation. Now, Malachi Black, for those who aren't up to date on some of the latest wrestling news, leader of the House of Black, has been rumored for a while now to be dissatisfied, and most recently was rumored to have asked for his release, and that the reasons given were stresses on his marriage, troubles with his own mental health, and just problems overall with the way that he is booked. So Malachi took to social this weekend to set the record straight. And in discussing his situation, in some ways, he validated CM Punk because he did confirm that, yes, in fact, he had asked for his release, but that he was extremely disappointed and upset that his reasoning, including allusions to his mental health and the content of private conversations with AEW, are now made public. CM Punk might have name dropped and cursed and, you know, looked like a spoiled brat, but the essential crux of his argument were, you have a leak and we have a bunch of amateurs back there who are supposed to be executive vice presidents who he was blaming, allegedly. You know, we can't say that he's right, but allegedly he was alluding to his problems with things getting out to the media being a propaganda campaign by the Elite. Malachi Black is not saying something that dissimilar when he says that, you know, he's having private conversations with executives that are now out there. Does Tony Khan have a problem with a leak in AEW, and is it a problem to have talent that also serve in executive positions?
Well, of course it is. I mean, and that goes back to, you know, Dusty Rhodes being the promoter, the booker, and the main event. You know, but yeah, I really do wonder about this, because I think it was Wrestling Observer that was talking about how between these two very distinct camps that do exist, I guess behind the scenes, you've got, you know, the Elite camp and then the Punk camp, that, you know, even the people who don't like the Elite talk about them being aloof and kind of passive aggressive. But, you know, then Meltzer goes on to say, you know, that the CM anti CM Punk fan, or not fans, but well, it's just called a faction, I guess, at this point, you know, have less bad things to say about the Elite than the anti-Punk people do about Punk. So, but at the end of the day, these are all grown-ass men. These are adults who should act like adults. And
we witnessed ourselves in Charleston when we saw the show that not only did we witness CM Punk going off script on camera, we witnessed an off-camera promo from Kenny Omega that was pretty much digging into the same sort of topic matter of
very passive aggressive right there.
Aggressive. And I mean, at All Out, before CM Punk got so riled up that he you know, did what he did. I mean, during the show itself, Kenny Omega commands the cameraman to get in close on him after the match, and your executive vice president, who maybe could give himself the, again, passive aggressive cover of like, well, I was just in character, but he was definitely giving a message beyond just the words he was saying to all those guys in the back. Try to follow that. There is an arrogance there that makes for compelling, and makes MJF what he is. I wouldn't necessarily make MJF your, you know, executive vice president. Don't put him as your right hand man, Tony. No, he's the least of your problems. There's an issue with taking these ego driven talent that makes them succeed in the ring and giving them executive and creative roles, which very well may be why Tony has decided over from the time of the beginning of AEW until now to take more of that control away from some of these individuals we've been talking about.
It's very true. I mean, these are people who refer to themselves as the best bout machine and best in the world. And for God's sake, one of the groups is called the Elite. So these are very, very huge egos. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
don't know. It as a wrestling fan, it just shatters the illusion I've had of the Elite and the group that is the Elite. All friends wrestling from being the Elite. Let me just see how many times I can say Elite in this broadcast.
I mean, I do think that is the big takeaway, is that all friends wrestling, the idea that we are still this grassroots alternative organization that isn't the wrestling business, that is just a group of friends putting on a show that they want to see. I think that we pretty much the actions of 2 weekends ago, and really dating back to Cody's departure, it's
Mhm.
sort of shattered that notion, or at least should, in your minds, fans, shatter that notion that that's what AEW is. It is a business still. It is still the wrestling business. It may not be WWE, but
Right.
this is not a group of friends out fighting the machine. It's just another part of the machine, and Tony is finding in a really real way now how hard it probably was in some of those years to be Vince McMahon.
Yep.
Got Vince's problems. Doug, how does I would say that I was going to ask you, how does Tony solve some of these problems? I think he's taken some of those steps. He realizes that he can't be a one-man show, but whether it's trusting backstage agents with more, or Tony Schiavone with more, it seems like he's putting more responsibility in the hands of trusted members of the wrestling business and not so much wrestlers.
And here's the thing too. You have forcibly removed some potentially incredibly toxic elements from both sides of this fight. And let's do things improve now? If they do, if morale improves backstage, if everything starts to improve, that is a huge red flag to Tony, or it should be, about where the actual problems are.
Do you think that Tony is part of the problem himself? I mean, obviously his decision making and the buck stops with him. So I guess to that extent, he is a part of any problem that AEW is having. But as we learn more about Tony's personality, as we witnessed ourselves a little bit of Tony's personality, do you think that that could be part of why, just like Vince McMahon before him, that you're going to have some folks that say you're a father figure to me, the way that Stone Cold does Vince McMahon, and John Cena does Vince McMahon, and you're going to have those who swear the man's the devil himself? Do you think that Tony and his large, outsized personality is going to create that same polar reaction, depending on who you ask?
I think so, because you look at well, you're CM Punk and your Malachi Blacks right now, and then ask Swerve Strickland what he thinks of AEW and Tony Khan, and it's a completely different story. Swerve is towing the company line right now, talking about how great AEW is. So yeah, I think just like any other wacky, carny who has $1 billion, who's gonna, start a wrestling company. He's gonna be a polarizing figure. I'm sure Billy Corgan, even though he's not a wacky carny billionaire, with NWA, he's definitely a wacky carny. I'm sure
He's still a wacky carny. He might not have the billions. He's probably just a millionaire, but yeah.
exactly just a millionaire from all
Yeah.
that Smashing Pumpkins money. But still, I'm sure he's a polarizing figure too, not to the extent or public extent anyway that Vince McMahon is, and in our sphere of knowledge that Tony Khan is.
I mean, it's fair to say that any manager is going to be a polarizing figure depending on the employee's relationship with that manager. But when you're talking about, again, we're all probably in our minds right now thinking of our own places of work and individuals that we're like, yeah, that one you have to tiptoe around, or that one's really cool. And someone else is going to have the complete opposite opinion on those people. You're timesing that by 100 when you're talking about the eccentricities of billionaires and professional wrestlers.
Now you've got me wondering if all of my employees think of me as a wacky carny.
Oh, I'm sure they think of you as something.
I'm sure they do.
I mean, it's true that some of what we're seeing writ large and playing out on our TV screens and that media scrum isn't really unusual for a corporate environment. It's just unusual for it to happen in the way it did, and
Absolutely.
that's unique
That's
to the wrestling industry.
that's behind boardroom closed doors and in offices, not in front of public and and cameras. But that's the wrestling world, brother.
So we both are in agreement AEW is going to survive this. This might be a red stain on them for a while. Do you think that this is going to be something that would, well, let's talk about some of the players involved. Like Tony, obviously the boss, he's learning from his own mistakes and sometimes in real time about maybe who he trusts or how much he can take on his own. But reports are CM Punk premeditated this, and there's definitely some indication in the way that the flow of that all came out of him, regardless of whether he was being asked the question he was actually answering. Definitely seemed like it could be premeditated. So is there a chance that CM Punk just did this because he didn't care to stay employed with AEW?
Probably so. I really do wonder that if Punk was just done with this, because my God, how can Colt Cabana live rent free in this man's head for years and years and years like this? I mean, what is up with that dude? I mean, this Punk needs some serious therapy with Cabana. I mean, what is that about?
Punk's entire history has been that of one who shut off at his mouth, and I think, as we alluded to in our last show when we didn't give this our full time, but did talk about it in our news segment, and that's the fact that it's the same thing that endeared so many of us to Punk. He's talking truth to power. He's giving the pipe bombs. He's telling Vince McMahon what we all think about Vince McMahon, but that no one should be able to say to Vince McMahon. And yes, it was tightly, it was at least somewhat controlled, semi-approved.
Sure.
But I mean, you can go back to Ring of Honor and the indie scene and just any place that Punk's ever worked. His whole life has been about pushing up against authority in ways that make that authority.
In his name.
Well, and as I saw some, and this is not to call out anyone else's choice of lifestyle, but I think I saw some writer put it pretty well, in that they've never actually known anyone straight edge that wasn't aggressively, self-righteous about their choices enough to want to make everyone else feel bad. So, CM Punk definitely has that rub you the wrong way grit about him anyway. And for those 7 years he was gone, yes, much of it was directed at WWE, but it's not like he had a kind word at all to say about professional wrestling. It's as if his experience with Vince and WWE completely ruined him on the sport of professional wrestling. He would be asked about it during his MMA press junkets and things, and he would dismiss that as, that fake stuff. Don't want to talk about that. That was another part of my life. I don't watch it anymore.
Right.
Garbage, blah, blah, blah. And you wonder now how much of that may really be true. Maybe Punk was burned out on the wrestling business. Maybe he did come back because he wanted the payday and wanted to see what life was like on the other side of the fence, and came to realize that it's not enough difference for him to want to stay involved in it.
That's what I was going to say. Do you think, all the ridiculousness behind the scenes, with the clicks and everything, just reminded him of how much he really, came to hate this business that he once did love? And is this, his escape plan?
Yeah, that's exactly what would be the end game for a premeditation. You're not going to look that way and win in the court of public opinion. You're not going to do what he did and think that it actually would lead to Tony being held up for ransom, basically, and punishing the elite. The only end goal I can see in that type of premeditation, the way it played out, is I want to get fired. I don't care if he lets me go. Mm-hmm. I have this contract. I'll tie him up in court. I'm still going to get my money. I'm just over this. A man who truly just wanted to take his muffins and go home.
And I think about Punk when he left, because he's like, something about, I'm old, I'm tired, I'm hurt, I'm human, or something like that. I'm like, I hear you, brother, but you're also a little wacko right now.
You're old and hurt, and you can't you can't take your muffins and go home.
I am also old, tired, hurt, and human, and have a bank account with my mom, which tells you all you need to know about me. But I go to work every day, man. Every day.
Obviously, we don't know how long these suspensions will last, and anything is possible in the world of professional wrestling. So you can't ever say never, but it truly seems as if Punk is done in AEW, which really means Punk is done in wrestling, because WWE obviously is not an option. Too many bridges burned there. Yes, Triple H is now in charge, but it's not like Punk had very kind things to say about Triple H either.
That doofus son-in-law is not bringing Punk in.
No, and there's nowhere else for Punk to go, and Punk maybe exactly. There's no. Wait,
wasn't Punk fired from Impact back in the day?
Do what now?
So wasn't Punk actually fired from Impact like way back in the day for fighting with somebody else? I can't think of his name now, but
if anyone out there knows that, yeah, drop that in the comments, because that's escaping my memory if he was there way back in the day. But there's no money there for
of course it would have been TNA back then, but
so you don't foresee Tony and CM Punk making amends and him inserting him back into the AEW locker room?
I don't think so.
So Punk is done. We're in agreement that Punk's done, probably with professional wrestling.
If Punk is out for a surgery right now, that's going to take 8 months to heal anyway. Punk is really not suspended right now. He's out on medical leave, I guess, and then his suspension would reasonably have to come after he's off of medical leave. My forte is not in HR, but this is just my thinking. But of course, before all that comes about, I think whatever legal ramifications are going to come from this. By the time Punk is healed and could potentially come back, I think it's going to be either tied up in court still or quietly taken care of, and things will resolve themselves. AEW will be without the Elite, without Punk, maybe without all of them.
Well, that was the next thing I was going to ask, because I think we're in agreement that Punk's days in AEW, whenever those happen to be made official, they're over. Like, for all intents and purposes. And it's a shame in some ways, because the ending overshadows what was actually a pretty miraculous one-year run. I mean, one of the biggest returns legit in wrestling history, quality in-ring work, more than quality mic work, some memorable feuds with MJF, Eddie Kingston. I mean, you could go down the list. It was a great comeback story until that ugly end. But this is probably the end of CM Punk. I don't think that it's the end of, let's talk about the others involved. CM Punk, definitely toxic, can't touch him. How about a Kenny Omega? How about the Young Bucks? Do they return at some point in time to AEW? Kenny especially is so involved with the launch of their first video game. I know that they would be eager to get him back if they can make amends and make it work and not upset the chemistry that they're trying to establish in the locker room. Do you see a path forward where an all elite wrestling actually includes the elite?
I think we're going to see it. We will see the Elite back before we see Punk back, for sure. And that has not really, I mean, even if this went on for like the next 2 years, which would be a hot mess for everybody if that happened, to take the Bucks. I'm not sure what Kenny's contract situation looks like, but I think the Bucks go right up just like MJF does to January 2024. So, but I think that the Elite will be back. Don't know about Punk. I don't think Punk will, and I don't think Ace still will, but
no one needs Ace still, and CM Punk is way too toxic to handle. I think I can see a Young Bucks and the Kenny Omega returning, especially Kenny returning. I don't know, though, that I see them returning as executive vice presidents. I think as part of all this that it would be wise for Tony to say, listen, this is the new reality. I know how things started, but it hasn't been that in a while. And it causes too much unrest. And that you pointed out earlier, you could go to Dusty, you can go to Jerry Lawler in Memphis.
Absolutely.
You can go. I mean, wrestling history is filled with stories and situations exactly, of family-run businesses or friend-run businesses or a father promoting a son or a promoter promoting himself.
Mm-hmm.
And in fairness, there was a lot of practicality behind that arrangement. The reason that Bill Watts wanted his son pushed is because his son's not going to the competition. His son will do what he's told. Jerry Lawler booked himself in Memphis to be the champion because he's not going to leave and go to WWF or NWA, and he could trust that he was going to do the right things because you put yourself, your family, your trusted family members in that situation. It's definitely different now. These aren't family-run businesses. These are businesses. And I just don't see a world where it makes sense for Kenny and the Young Bucks to maintain executive vice president positions at the same time you have them wrestling for championships on your television. And I think Doug is frozen on me. While Doug is there, looking very pensive, and then we'll let him back in here in a sec. But yes, what I was saying is that I think that there is a path that brings the Young Bucks back. I think that there's a path that brings Kenny Omega back. I think that it's very wise, though, that they do not come back in leadership positions. Will they accept that? That is, I guess, to be determined. Obviously it was something that if you look at it, Cody Rhodes left. He couldn't accept it. He would rather be a performer for WWE than he would be to be just a performer with AEW, having lost his creative control. I was going to ask Doug if he thought that if the Elite did not return to AEW, could he see an environment where Triple H would take them on? For me, as I said earlier, I believe truly that Punk is done in the world of professional wrestling. Here's Doug coming back. Punk is done, and there he is.
I think Tony Khan just tried to shut me down, man.
I think that he's not appreciative of the content of this programming. Doug, I was getting ready to talk about the question. Now, oh no, you're looking like you're freezing on me again. He is. That's hilarious. Well, we know that Doug will not be in AEW any longer after tonight, apparently. Yes, I can see. Oh, Doug, can you hear me at least? Max headroom there. Oh, hilarious. Hey, Doug, if you can hear me, do you see a world in where Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks would be accepted in WWE? Can you see a path where they go on, as Cody did, to say, I'd rather be a performer on the biggest company and the biggest stage than to be behind the scenes, not respected any longer, leaving the AEW environment? So I think we might have lost Doug maybe for the last time because we were getting ready to wrap up. But that is the question that I pose to any of you all out there. Would you rather see CM Punk and the Elite elsewhere? I know Punk can't go to WWE, but do you think that there's a spot that they could maybe get to with Kenny and Young Bucks where Triple H makes them an offer and Tony Khan cuts his losses? So let us know what you think. Drop that in the comments, because I can foresee a world where Kenny Omega, who back in the day did wrestle some developmental matches, tryout matches, did not get picked up by WWE. The Young Bucks are a team that really, to their credit, they played up the fact that, WWE wanted them for some period of time there. And so they use that in negotiations. There's Doug back. Doug, I was getting ready to wrap it up, but you're back.
I'm back. I was getting actually on the Facebook to at least I can do it on the phone, but I'm back. Okay, now we have an echo. Hold on.
But you seem very clear. Doug, I was wrapping up
Quickly
here.
before Tony shuts us down again.
I was asking you what you thought. We think Punk's gone. I think, though, that even though I agree with you that there is a pathway back for the elite, maybe not as executive VPs, but do you see them possibly doing the Cody thing? I would rather be just a performer on the biggest stage than to come back at a reduced capacity where I've lost my creative control on your stage. Do you think that they could play that into a big money deal where you see them in WWE?
Absolutely. I think they could totally play that, especially with Triple H in charge now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That was the other thing. Do you think that that's more possible now than it would have ever been before? Because WWE was apparently interested back in the Vince days.
Tony really has to get his house in order, in the next year because we know that the Bucks and MJF definitely, contracts expire in January, and those are some big Royal Rumble pops that could totally happen there. So
yes, it should be worth noting that MJF got more money to come back, but did not do an extension on his deal. He wants to be that free agent that people fight over. And that's the way wrestling used to be. I mean, Ted Turner and his wallet, Vince McMahon and his wallet. Tony's going to have a similar situation, particularly with those employees that haven't yet burned their bridges in WWE, which, again, that completely excludes CM Punk. But Young Bucks, they've wrestled Ring of Honor, they've wrestled Impact, they've wrestled overseas, obviously in New Japan, a lot of independents. They've been just about everywhere but on the WWE roster, and Triple H would have to be interested in a Young Bucks. Triple H is very interested. He's made it known that he will be very competitive on the free agent market. What does that mean other than I'm bringing back former talent, which he's already done, and I'm bringing folks home from AEW, which to date has only really been Cody Rhodes. But there is definitely now more than just a crack in that door open where that can start to go the other way pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. It's really an interesting time. A year ago, if we would not even have dreamed of having a conversation about AEW jumping to WWE, or how awesome Roman Reigns is.
Look at that. Doug doing business with the segue. Yes, folks. This Sunday, we return 8 o'clock Eastern time for our normal Sunday night live broadcast. And our topic is acknowledging Reigns. That is something, obviously, we would never have guessed we'd be doing a few years ago, talking of the greatness of our tribal chief. But what Roman Reigns has accomplished is quite significant in the world of wrestling, particularly modern wrestling. No one holds the world championship in modern day wrestling promotions for 2 entire years. The complete opposite of what we've seen in AEW, who originally looked like they would be the ones that would have long title reigns, where we've had champion, interim champion, unified champion, strip champion, championship tournament. I mean, it's ridiculous how hot potato AEW has become, and WWE's become stability, and that stability rests on the shoulders of one super huge Samoan.
Our tribal chief. Acknowledge him.
And that's what we're going to talk about Sunday. Join us. We're going to talk the greatness of Roman Reigns, where we as fans got Roman wrong, where Roman was right all along, and what exactly it means in modern wrestling to have a champion made as strong as Roman Reigns has been made. But where do we go with him from here? We're going to speculate on all that. Of course, we'll return with our news and our match of the week and the big finishes. And so we'll obviously continue to follow the the AEW situation as it relates to the elite. Maybe MJF, maybe Malachi Black, maybe Thunder Rosa. I mean, there's a lot. We have really shown that this whole thing is centered on CM Punk, his big mouth at that media scrum, but it goes way deeper than that. It goes back to a corporate culture that Tony has either perpetuated or allowed to exist, how AEW has changed from what it once was to what it currently is, and what does he do about it, and how does all this complicate his television contracts, which is really the story we'll have to follow over the next few months, because that is not only going to determine the future, Doug, of CM Punk in the elite, that's going to determine the future of Ring of Honor. and every other man and woman on the AEW roster as to whether they have a place to viably ply their trade.
And considering some developments tonight, I have some theories about where ROH is going. So, but
maybe
we can talk about that later.
I like that. We'll add that to our topic list. And fans, we appreciate you tuning in. As wrestling fans, we want all this to work out for the betterment of us. So, Tony, get your house in order and stop censoring Doug. He's just trying to tell you the truth.
I'm trying to be an honest hand of the king here. That's all I'm trying to be. You know, don't auto high tower me and send me back to Old Town.
He's trying to do it respectfully. He's not doing it to your face in a media scrum. He's just trying to provide some helpful advice. Thanks for staying up late with us, folks. We appreciate it.
Thanks
Tune in on Sunday. Appreciate it. See you then.
Good night, everybody.